Welcome to On the Bubble Podcast, episode 74. I'm your host, Sabasa J. Wade, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today, we're going to be doing an episode on how to draft Enigma. Hopefully, this episode will be posted right before U.S. Nationals, and hopefully you can listen to this and use all this information for your Nats, for any upcoming Nats, even if it's after U.S. Nats. But before we go into our main topic, how was your week, Yuki?
My week's been pretty good. I kind of don't know where my week went, honestly. I don't know, just working, practicing draft mostly. Have not been playing all that much Classic Constructed, despite having a Classic Constructed calling coming up in 4 days. 4 days. It's Tuesday right now, June 11th. So in 4 days, we have Classic Constructed calling. People ask me, you're surely really tested for this format, right? And then I kind of laugh and just tell them, like, for me, calling is like kind of just like a fun event. And I think especially because we have our own nationals 3 weeks later and then PT 3 weeks later, and they're the same format. So I've been focused on draft. I'm going to probably play Azalea or Zen for the calling, and maybe new for the PTI event. Just try it out, have some fun. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm going to play, see how those decks feel, use it as like a way to try out those decks, see how US Nats go and like the results from that, and then really ramp into Classic Constructed testing. But right now, I've just been trying to get all my limited testing for Amsterdam and Canadian Nationals kind of underway.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think this limited format's kind of tough, and it's been a week since we started testing, and I feel like I still need like maybe 10, 15 more drafts in before I feel confident.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think there's a lot of edges to be gained in this format. And how are you feeling about the format? Like, it's deep. Do you like it? Is it fun?
Yeah, so I feel like this is the first format that really tests both your skills in like the drafting process and in the gameplay as well. Whereas like a set like Bright Lights, it was a set that really tested your skills in like just the drafting portion, and the gameplay was kind of bland. And it was the other way around in like Uprising, where the drafting process was like you chose a lane, you stuck to it, and then the gameplay was quite difficult. I feel like this is like a good mix of both of those.
I think I agree with that. I think this is also one of the most synergistic sets that we have, where like I've just noticed talking with people about the format, they'll ask me like what I think of a card, and it's like so dependent on the other cards you have in your deck. And there's like these cards that work well together, especially like the first and second tenant cycle. I feel like combining the go again with some kind of other effect is just like really, really strong. So it's like kind of all like contextual. Like I think like Path Well Traveled is like such a build around that lets you like play all these like transcends. If you've transcended, you get a bonus, or if you played another blue, you get a bonus. Like it kind of like unlocks a whole bunch of things. And there's like a few things in the set that are like that, where it's just super synergy focused. And honestly, I'm having a blast with this set. I love it. I think it's my favorite set. Would you agree with that? Is it your favorite limited set, or too early to say?
No, I think this is gonna be my favorite limited set. At the beginning, I'm just like, oh wow, this set's sweet. There's so many things I can do. And then, 5, 6 drafts in, I'm like, oh sweet. There's things I didn't know about this set that I could do still. I feel like every time I draft, there's like something new I'm learning, and it's kind of sweet. That's still the case.
Yeah, it is really neat. And it's nice when the cards can kind of play different roles. They kind of change depending on the other cards in your deck. It's really rewarding, especially for I think people that enjoy drafting a bunch, because it kind of gives you like new stuff to constantly be learning and working on. And I think this set delivers that in spades. Before we move on to our main topic, just quick shout out to our Patreon. Thank you so much to all of our patrons who support us and give back to us each and every week. We really, really appreciate you. Lots of folks have been posting in the Patreon Discord, talking about the format, talking about their classic constructed decks for Nats coming up. And if that's something you're interested in, consider giving back to the Patreon for as little as $2 a month. You can check us out on the bubble at patreon.com. But we appreciate all of our listeners, regardless of if they give back, of course.
Awesome. Then you wanna move on to our main topic?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so to start off, as always, we're just going to talk about what commons and the rares that exist in this set and how much they block for. So Illusionist has 24 commons, 9 of which is a no block. a 9 of which only blocks for 2, and 6 blocks for 3, which means that this is a class that blocks for the least and has the most number of no blocks in the set. We will talk a little bit more about if these are actually no blocks or if they're like a lot of these cards have ward on them, so they like pseudo block, but we'll go a little bit more into detail with that a little bit later. And for the rares, we have 12 rares. There's going to be 9 of them that blocks for, sorry, there's 6 of them that blocks for 3, 3 of them that blocks for 2, and we have Moon Chakra. And I just put this as a different class of blocking card because when you play it, all it does is prevent damage. And the red one prevents 3, the yellow one prevents 2, and the blue one prevents 1. And it prevents 2 more damage if you've transcended this turn. I'm kind of not sure how to evaluate how much this card blocks for yet. Do you have any ideas on this, Yuki?
I like Red Moon Chakra a lot. The card blocks for 3. The card is Evasive Leap, but slightly worse because it doesn't block Pick to Pieces. That's my opinion. Like I've played 3 Enigma drafts. I think I've had Moon Chakra in my draft every single time. I've had 5 Transcend cards, and I have yet to enable the Transcend text on it. I'm sure that it can happen, and when it does, it's probably super powerful. But like this card, like basic, like you should think of this card as like it's closer to a 3 block than it is a 5 block. I think the red one specifically.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Would you play like the yellow or the blue one right now?
Uh, the blue one is like pretty sketchy. If you have a lot of Transcend cards, it's like kind of okay because it's a blue that you can arsenal and then convert into 3 block. The yellow one I do think is playable. I would hope not to play it, but I'm kind of willing to play it. Just having block value that you can arsenal is pretty powerful in Enigma, and like I've cited in Yellow Moon Chakra to like I don't know board out a second tentative Chi Tide versus New or something. Like I'm kind of okay doing that, but I don't think it's a card I like actively want in my deck. It's like okay. It's like a yellow 2 block. It's like a yellow Sigil of Solitude, basically. I think it's like similar to that card where it's like you don't want this in your deck, but if you have like one of them, it's like I don't know, it's kind of okay.
Yeah, it's not a disaster to play it.
Yeah, it's like it's a lot better than a bauble because it blocks 2 and you can arsenal it and it will still block 2 from arsenal. So it's like it like actually does do something like kind of useful.
You know what? That's a good way of thinking it. It's just a really good cracked bubble.
Yeah, like because like I feel like Enigma will not always, but sometimes like throw like you'll often like throw a 3 block in front of like Zen's weapon or something, and this just like covering it up for 2 is like kind of good. I don't know. It's fine.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, as I was saying earlier, this is the class that blocks the least, but almost all of their cards still have ward on them. So, as long as you can resolve the card, at least at red, they typically block for like a reasonable amount, right?
I think 3 is the most common.
Yeah, so then it blocks for 3. So, like, interestingly, it feels like these no blocks don't make Enigma bad at blocking, right?
Yeah, the way to think about these red spectras, I think, especially the instant speed ones, is that you get to play them and attack with them, and then they kind of like pre-block damage where they have the ward effect, so you get some amount of block value out of it. So often like if you play like Waning Vengeance red, that's the one cost ward 3 that if you have a blue pitch and it gets destroyed, you get a spectral shield. If you have a Waning Vengeance red and you play it, you swing it for 3, and then you get the ward 3 value out of it, like you basically just played fact finding mission, right? Like it's like a 2 for 6. It's a little bit awkward because like sometimes you can't get the ward 3 out of it because like New will dagger and it's just too inefficient to stop the dagger, for example. So you don't always get the ward 3, and there's like a bit of an asterisk there, but that's kind of like how I'm thinking about these cards. Do you think of them the same way?
I think I stopped thinking about ward in that way, at least recently, because a lot of the time your opponent is going to be trying to devalue your ward one way or another by either trying to, as you said, dagger, or even like if you have a ward 3 and Zen attacks you with his weapon, the Kakara?
Mm-hmm.
it's only blocking 2 if you no block the 2. So they're trying to devalue your ward. Yes, if a card says ward 3, it feels like it's blocking 3, but a lot of the time it might be blocking just a little less than that, maybe like 2, sometimes even 1, which can be pretty bad value for you.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think it's something to keep in mind with these cards. Yeah, I think it's important to understand that you're not always getting the full value out of the ward, but I think that they do have the very real upside that like sometimes you play this and attack and your opponent looks at their hand and they're just like block for 3, yellow battlefront bastion for 6, arsenal a card, go, because that's all that they can do, and then this card's worth like a lot of value. So that I think that's kind of like the upside to these wards, is that like waxing specter is like a pseudo 3 for 7, go again. Waning vengeance is like a pseudo 2 for 6, but you have to work for the ward value, so you'd be like maybe it's worse than those, but it's not that clear cut because they can also take over the game. So I think they have like some upsides and then some downsides, and it's important to think about like if you're able to protect that ward or not, I think.
In general, whenever my opponent presents damage that is like equal to the ward or greater, I'm in like this boat right now that I kind of want to cash in that ward for its maximum value and then like continue playing my other cards, assuming that my deck is filled with other cards I want to play.
I think I agree with that. I think it's often like an opportunity to get full value out of that ward. And I think this is especially true against new, who has pick to pieces and can really punish you for having too much ward. If you see an opportunity to be like, they're playing water the seeds and I cannot block and just get like ward 3 out of my waning vengeance, let's do that. And then if they pick to pieces me, like it's still good, but like, and like maybe they get my like waxing specter out of the pick to pieces, I'm like, that's still good, but like at least you got the 3 value out of your waning vengeance. Like it really helps mitigate that. So I think not over protecting your ward is important, but there's certainly times where protecting your ward takes over the game, and I think evaluating when to do that is probably the most interesting part of the deck.
Oh, yeah, I think I agree. Let's talk about Majestics next. These are cards that you're not going to see every time, but when you do, I think the 2 cards on this list is cards that you definitely want to be taking highly, or at least considering being Enigma for these cards. So I think the first card here is Manifestation of Mirror Guy. If you've played Constructed and played against Enigma, I think this is the card that's going to make you, I don't know how to say it. It definitely makes me sad whenever my opponent resolves Mirror Guy and attacks me for 8. And it's more impactful in Limited because 8 is like almost half of your health.
Yeah. Mirror Guy is a beating. The card is extremely good. I think it's quite hard to beat if you get to play it with your chi. And I think if you have it, like making a point of lining up a chi with this card is like a whole game plan into of itself. And most of the time, if you do that thing, you should probably win the game. Not 100%, but like it gives it greatly, like I'm sure anytime you resolve a Mirror Guy with 4 counters on it with the chi, it's like your win percentage must go up massively, assuming you can still attack with it.
Oh yeah, it has to. Unless you're about to die, there's like almost no reason to like set up the Mirror Guy, make a chi, even if you take 10 damage for it, you should probably do it. Flip over the Mirror Guy with like, attack for 8 and then play something else.
Yeah, and it's kind of like 8 unblockable damage because your opponent has to clear the Mirror Guy or they're just so far behind. Enigma in general has this going on where if you have like a ward, like a reasonable ward threat that they like don't like you have like a waxing specter or something, like the entire game kind of becomes about that waxing specter, and it often makes it really hard for your opponent to block because they need to be able to clear the waxing specter or you just like run them over. So Enigma in general, her damage is like close to true damage, kind of, because it's like you kind of get punished for blocking too much against Enigma.
And if they do block it, or they're forced to block it because let's say they're at like 5 life and you play Manifestation on Mirror Guy, that typically means you'll get to protect your Manifestation on Mirror Guy next turn.
Yeah, and you just get more and more and more ahead. That's kind of like the gameplay loop of Enigma that I think some players don't like, but I think that there's like a lot of ways to try and mitigate it as well. So Mirror Guy is amazing. I think everybody knows this. The other card that is very good, that's probably not a surprise, is Rage Spectre. This is the 2 cost, 3 block aura. It is an action, but if you control no other illusionist auras, it gives you an action point again. So it kind of gives us like go again if you have if you have no other illusionist auras. On your turn, it's ward 6. On your opponent's turn, it's ward 1. So this is kind of like a blue 3 for 7 that blocks 3. Is basically how I think of this card. And if you can protect it, is obviously very good. But often you can just like let it go for ward 1, and you like always get full value out of the ward. This card's not as good as Mirror Guy. I think it's like probably a little bit. I haven't played with it, but I think it's probably a little bit better than Waxing Spectre and Spectral Manifestations, or at least on par with them. Which is to say, it's like probably one of the best cards in your deck if you have it. I don't know if you have to like force Enigma if you have this, but like if you're like thinking about being Enigma and you see this card, is like yeah, like I think this would be like a definite card I would consider a signal, like a very strong signal for Enigma if you get past this.
I'm at the point where I think Rage Spectre is almost equivalent to Spectral Manifestation and Waxing Spectre in just like in power level. It's yes, you are getting a little bit more for a little bit more stats on like basically on every aspect on this card, but I don't know if that's enough to swing the game into your favor enough that you should be forcing Enigma for Rage Spectre. I think is going to be a wrong decision to make a good portion of the time. And Enigma is a hero that you kind of want to be, one of two Enigmas in your pod for you to have a powerful Enigma deck. And if you force Rage Spectre and be the third Enigma, I feel like that will lose you more percentages more than gain you more percentages.
It's interesting. I used to feel like that. I've been feeling more like 3 Enigmas can be good, but what I would say is usually in a 3 Enigma pod, not all the Enigma decks are good. The weird thing about Enigma is I kind of feel like you have like 2 main cards that matter a lot. And then the other cards are like much more replaceable. And those cards are Spectral Manifestation, especially at red, and Waxing Spectre at red as well. And sometimes you can just be in a 3 Enigma pod and just like have the right seat where you get more copies of that card and still have a very good deck. And sometimes you can be in a 3 Enigma pod and just like not see those. So I think that pod can like have a strong Enigma deck with 3 Enigmas because of like the nature of how she is. But I don't think that, yeah, I don't think all the Enigmas will be good if it's a 3 Enigma pod.
That's fair. That's fair. Let's talk about the key cards then and start talking about, the cards that we've been talking about, which is Spectral Manifestation and Waxing Spectre. I think you are right on these two cards, and it might be just like a result of people not knowing that these two cards are the key cards for Enigma, and these two cards are the cards that you definitely need to make your Enigma deck good.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. Spectral Manifestations is the 2 cost that makes a Spectral Shield and has Go Again. And then if you have no other auras, you put 3 counters on it at red and 2 at yellow, 1 at blue. You can kind of think of this as like a Surging Strike. This is a 2 for 5 Go Again that makes a shield. And then if that shield sticks, you have like a 4 power weapon that costs 0 and has Go Again. Is like kind of insane. Waxing Spectre is like functionally very similar. It is the ward 3, and if you've pitched a blue, it gets a counter on it. So you can play this, you get a ward 3, you get a counter, it attacks for 4 Go Again. It's sort of like a 3 for 7, or like I don't know. What makes these Go Again cards so important in Enigma? Because I think we both agree that these are really, really powerful and like one of the things you need in Enigma. Why do you think these Go Again cards are so valuable?
I think it's very valuable, obviously, because if these auras live, then you end up with a one cost hammer and with Go Again, which can run over the game. And that's, I think, level one of like just understanding that these cards are broken, or maybe not broken, but just very above rate would be if they live for a turn or two, they can run over the game. And if you started with a Spectral Manifestation and gone into a Waxing Spectre, and then you got to save both of these auras, then you can pitch a yellow and attack for 8, which is very above rate. It's kind of ridiculous. You basically just made a manifestation of Mirror Guy. I think that's just like level 1 of thinking of these cards in that way. And then the deeper one would be once you have these one cost go again weapons, you can start pairing them with high value or high attacking generics, like Fact Finding Mission, for example, which is a 2 cost for 6. And then now your turn cycle is Pitch a Blue, attack with Waxing Spectre, attack with Fact Finding Mission, which is a 2 card 10. And then limited, doing a 2 card 10 is game winning.
Yeah. I think because they have Go Again, they take over the game that much harder. I think the other reason that the Go Again is so important is it kind of comes back to like that core tenet that we talked about, that I think every deck in this format needs to be able to leverage a four card hand on offense in an efficient way. And these are like the primary way that you do that, because Enigma doesn't have very much Go Again outside of these. And I think that the play pattern, remember we kind of talked about like Enigma's damage being kind of like true damage, like it's very hard for your opponent to block because they have to clear your aura. Well, if you go Waxing Spectre or Spectral Manifestations for 4 Go Again, then you Battlefront Bastion for 7, you put your opponent where like you're presenting 11 damage, which is half their life total. But they don't want to block because they need to kill your aura. But if you do this play pattern twice, they kind of have to block. And I think that's like one of the most powerful things about Enigma is you can kind of like force your opponent to not block, force them to clear your aura. And sometimes they're doing so in an inefficient way. Like if New is like daggering and you're able to cover up those daggers with like equipment and their hand is like a 4 card 9 or something and you're getting value out of your ward, you're just like, oh, I'm so ahead on value, like whatever, I don't care that you killed my auras, I'm just gonna like do another Go Again and hit you for 7 again, and then you have to block this time, and they're like, oh no. So I think that's like kind of where Enigma's power comes from, and these cards enable that play patterns. You also need them in the mirror, because if you can't use 4 cards on offense, you just get run over in the mirror.
Yeah, so I think the issues with like the Enigma mirror is like you get into these spots where you kind of want to protect your auras and you start blocking, then you can't use a 4 card hand to clear their auras. If you have Spectral Manifestation and Waxing Spectre, you can just say no blocks on all of their attacks, and then just deploy a 4 card hand and attack them. So now they can't protect their ward. The key aspect on doing this is just having Waxing Spectre reds and Spectral Manifestation reds. So I think against everyone and all 3 heroes, these 2 cards are the fundamental key cards that you need to beat them all.
I don't know if you'd agree with this, but I find arsenaling these cards is like one of the most powerful things you can do in the hero. Like anytime I get to play a turn cycle where like maybe I had some ward, my ward blocks 3, I take some damage, and then I just get to go Spectral Manifestations, Fact Finding Mission, present 10 damage, arsenal of Spectral Manifestations. I just feel so far ahead because I know I put my opponent in that bind, and I know I can immediately put them in the same spot on my next hand. So I think that you're like, the way I'm thinking about Enigma decks is you want like some of these Go Again effects, and then you want some strong chain enders, which is usually the big generic attacks, which is kind of like our next key card. These big generics like Fact Finding Mission, Battlefront Bastion, Blanche, even the emissaries are good. You kind of want to be able to follow it up with that. And I think for me, Haze Shelter is also kind of in this slot. I think it's a reasonably worse than the strong generics, but it does fill a similar role. And like, I'm okay playing a red Haze Shelter. I think it's fine.
Sorry, which one's Haze Shelter again?
It is the ward 4 that costs 2 if you have a blue in your pitch. Otherwise, it's a ward 1.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It's kind of like those chain under, like those generic chain unders. It's like a little different because it doesn't attack as much, but it has some defensive value and it can stick around. I don't know. It has some trade-offs. I think I prefer like the generics generally, but Haze Shelter is still fine.
I guess we were talking about these 2 cards. I think another card that comes up in a lot of conversation right now is Waning Vengeance. What do you think about Waning Vengeance right now?
So this card's actually in our overrated category. I think in general, especially the yellow and blue Waning Vengeances are just not where you want to be. But I do think I actively want one red Waning Vengeance. If I have an Uphold Tradition, which is the gloves that you can pay 1 to put a +1 counter on an aura you control, and then it has ward. The play pattern of playing a Waning Vengeance, attacking for 3, and then flipping up Uphold Tradition, like you're doing 4 Go Again with a ward 3. That's just Waxing Spectre. Like you've built your own Waxing Spectre, and we talked about how important that card is. And I think just like having a build your own is really good. And the Uphold Tradition protecting it is also like super relevant. Like against new or something, it's just like, oh, I did this play and like your first dagger like doesn't matter. So I think it's like actively pretty good. And I think I like actively want one, but I don't want a whole bunch of these. They're kind of, it's hard to get the ward 3 like we talked about. And anytime you're not getting the ward 3, it's like sometimes you're just playing like a 2 for 5 or a 2 for 4, and that's just not really good enough.
I think I'm looking for Uphold Tradition first, and then once I get the Uphold Tradition, I'm gonna be looking for the Waning Vengeance. I'm typically not looking for the other way around. I'm not gonna be like speculating on a Waning Vengeance first and then looking for the Uphold Tradition.
That's fair. I'm willing to speculate on it, but I'm not spending premium picks to do so. Like if I can get like a 6th, 7th pick red Waning Vengeance, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of okay. Like if I don't know, it depends on what else is in the pack. There's a lot of cards I'd rather have, but I'm okay taking this. And if I'm like low on ward threats, I'm not so sure Enigma's that open. I'm like pretty happy to have this. I do think you want a decent number of wards in your deck. So I don't know if I'm quite as low on it as you, but yeah.
After playing with Waning Vengeance a couple times, I'm very low on it now. I feel like when this card does the exact like the perfect scenario of like it getting the ward 3, you making the spectral shield out of it and attacking for 3, this card is very strong and you go, wow, this is probably one of the best cards in my deck. And then you get into these spots where the most efficient thing to do is to play your Waning Vengeance, but you can't attack with it. And it doesn't ward for 3, and then you felt like you paid 1, used the card, and blocked for 2. That delta feels really bad to me, that sometimes this card just doesn't do enough and actively kind of hurts to play. And when that happens, that's almost game losing, I think.
That's definitely fair. All right. Other than that, we can carry on. Equipment's very, very good in Enigma. Stopping the 1 value damages from like the tigers or the news daggers or spectral shields even is super, super important. Also stopping breakpoints is super important. And I think when you use these is very skill testing and very central to Enigma's gameplay. In general, the Keikoi is excellent in Enigma. I think arguably like just 4 Keikoi is like arguably Enigma's best setup. The prevent ones that are just completely unconditional. Those are all fantastic and I think very high picks. The headpiece Aqua Seeing Shell is also pretty good. It lets you pitch a blue to flip it up and draw a card, and it blocks for 1. I particularly like this if you have like the Waning Vengeance, because then you can get the extra spectral shield out of your Waning Vengeance, and it just kind of like adds up to be a decent amount of value. It also lets you filter some of, like if you're playing a bunch of Transcend cards, it lets you filter some of the Transcend cards for block cards if you need to. So I've been pretty impressed with that equipment as well. But basically any equipment that blocks is pretty good in Enigma.
What do you think about the equipment that says if you have 1 life, you can flip it over?
I think I'm pretty low. I like these equipments in general. I think they're kind of underrated, but I think they're underrated in Zen and New. In Enigma in particular, I'm not a huge fan. The 4 life is like kind of less useful because like the heirloom of rabbit hide, because like it's hard to get the 4 value out of it. It has wards, so it can kind of just go away. And Enigma often doesn't play that well from behind because you kind of need like a board state and a lot of like if you're like endgame, like if they're at like 2 and you go like waxing specter attack you for 4, they can like block with 1 card then keep poking you and you're like kind of in trouble. So I haven't really liked that. And I found the chi one like really hard to activate. Like like the other thing is like by the time I'm at 1 HP, my deck is usually like all chi. So I'm kind of dead anyways. That's like the other thing about the 1 HP equipments in Enigma. I don't know if you found that, but
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar spot where once you're at 1 with Enigma, it's very hard to just like block anymore and feels like already kind of doomed. And all of the options you have at 1 health, the 1 health equipments, don't really help you get out of that spot. I kind of wish like the 4 ward one just turned into an aura as well, so you can start attacking with it or something. I think that would have made that card much more reasonable.
yeah, agreed with that. All right, moving on with key cards, we have Astral Etchings. I'm assuming you mean the red one. This is a rare. It costs 1 and it blocks for 3. It is an action, and It lets you put 3+1 counters on an aura with ward you control. If you control a spectral shield, you can play it as an instant. Why is this card good?
This is your only way to have an attack reaction in Enigma, and attack reactions are just good in general. In this format, typically in the mirror, the Enigma mirror, you want to be able to force damage through, and Astral Etchings really does help you push that damage and clear the ward when they're not expecting it. And that can really turn the game around. And against people like Zen and New, just having an attack reaction that pushes 3 damage is actually kind of important. If you're playing enough Spectral Manifestation, having the Spectral Shield is not too hard. It also has the added bonus of if you already have one Spectral Shield, you don't actually have to target the Spectral Shield with Astral Etchings. You can target anything else that has Ward as well. And you can give those cards go again as well. I think this card is just like very flexible, blocks for 3, always good. And when you play it, it is impactful enough that it's gonna be strong. And I actually don't mean just the red one. I kind of like the yellow and the blue one as well.
Mhm.
The blue one being a blue 3 block, and the yellow one also still being a 3 block. They work well in pitch stacks and in very end games where they can't even afford to leak one, and then having an attack reaction play pattern of your opponent having to overblock all of your ward attacks is very strong. And blue astral etching just does that job for you having one in your deck.
I agree with all that. I was gonna say I like the blue because it's a blue 3 block. I like the yellow decently as well. The other thing I like about the yellow is that even though like you often block with this card, it pairs nicely. Like it curves perfectly with spectral manifestations, and I don't really think that you want to be like turning your 3 block into +2 counters on your thing. But like occasionally you get left with extra cards, and I've like just put this in arsenal and then drawn a spectral manifestations and be like, I do 2 more damage. Like, okay, like it's a 1 for 2 go again. That's kind of fine. And if it sticks, it's like insane.
As an attack reaction,
It's like pretty good.
if the card lives, like if your ward, like your spectral shield that you put the astral etching lives, man, that's kind of insane, right? Like now it's not the Titan's Fist. It's like it's an Anathos that costs 1.
Yeah. So I think especially if you have like this card in Arsenal is like quite decent if you know you have spectral manifestations to draw into because it's just very clean. So I've also liked that. Okay, so that's astral etching. We've been talking about it a lot, so let's move to this point. 3 blocks, I think, are really key in Enigma. Like, honestly, like I'll pick like a waxing specter and then like a bunch of blue 3 block illusionist cards and just be like, these are the best cards in the pack. I don't know if you agree with me, but I think they're just like super good.
Yeah, I think anything that has a blue strip and a 3 block together is kind of insane in Enigma.
Honestly, even like the yellow 3 blocks, like they're not great, but like yellow vengeful apparition, kind of good. It's like fine. It's just fine.
I'm at a point where like I'm picking up red vengeful apparitions because it
Yep.
blocks for 3.
Yep. Agreed. With that, Moon Chakra, which we talked about, is fantastic, and Evasive Leap also fantastic. Being able to arsenal block value super super good. That play pattern that we talked about of waxing specter into big attack is really good if you get to arsenal, or even better if you get to arsenal Evasive Leap. You don't have to have the Evasive Leap to make that play pattern good, but it's like it just makes it that much easier to protect your board if your opponent stumbles. I used to think that I wanted to board these out in the mirror. I'm starting to feel like defending is important enough that I'm okay playing like 1 or 2 copies of these in the mirror, but I probably don't want more than that.
We really didn't talk about it. Why are 3 blocks good in Enigma?
Well, so many of your cards block 2, which we talked about. There's 6 cards that block for 3 in the illusionist card pool, and protecting your ward is really really important. And when you block, you want it to be impactful. So I think just like having the 3 blocks when you can get them is really important. And I think that the difference between the Enigma decks that are mostly 2 blocks and the difference between the Enigma decks that are mostly 3 blocks as like the filler, like non-waxing specter, non-generic cards, like generic attacks, the difference is massive. It's so big.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It's like when your opponent attacks you with a fact finding mission for 6, you needing to block with 3 cards in hand versus 2 cards in hand is quite large. And because you are playing a bunch of cards that have no block value as well, if they attack for 7 and you just can't cover it up, you might be in a spot where you wanted to cover it up to protect your ward. And if you did, you won the game, but now you can't, and then your turn is like play some like a plays a haze shelter and attack, and that's just not good enough to start winning the game. Just having these 3 blocks and allowing yourself to actually cover up the large attacks your opponent comes in with is quite crucial in running away with the game, honestly.
Yeah. I think Enigma also plays like primarily 2 card plays. Like you pitch a card and it costs 2 or 3 and you play it. Both the big attacks and Waxing Spectre and Spectral Manifestation and Waning Vengeance, like they all require a card to pitch. So I think that's another reason. Like block 6, send a thing. Super, super good. The last card that I think everybody knows is good is Battlefront Bastion. This is the generic big attack, 3 for 7 at red that blocks 2, and if it blocks on its own, it prevents the next 1 damage. This card is like kind of crazy in Enigma because it lets you deal with like the breakpoints. It's like one of the only efficient ways to block with the to block the daggers or to block Sen's weapon. So Battlefront Bastion, super super premium. All the colors are good. Honestly, I'm pretty happy picking any of them. Like yellow Battlefront Bastion, kind of insane.
Yeah, it does everything so efficiently. It attacks for 6, it blocks for 3.
And you get to play it against new. Like the blue one is like sometimes it's like a little scary because it's a blue 5 power, but like the yellow one, oh, I'll put that in my deck. Block those daggers.
Oh, so true. It's so true. It's so funny in this set that the blue big power cards are kind of a little bit worse because the existence of new being able to play and attack you with it late game. If you know you're a deck that goes to these late game scenarios against new, you really don't want these 5 power blues in your deck.
Agree with that. Okay. Moving on to overrated. Waning Vengeance, pretty much all colors. I think we kind of covered this one. We talked about it a bunch. It's hard to get the full ward value out of it. But the first one with your Uphold Tradition, still very good. And it is like a playable card. I just think it's not. I think that people thought this and Waxing Spectre are close. I don't think they're close. I think the difference between these 2 cards is massive.
Yeah, I agreed. I think we talked about it enough. Let's talk about the next overrated card, which is Haze Shelter. You mentioned this a little bit earlier as well. This is the 2 cost instant that ward X, and X is equal to 4 at red if you have a blue card in your pitch. Otherwise, it is 1.
Just hard to get the word value. Like on his face, you're like, wow, this is a 2 card 8, but like getting the blue in your pitch is not trivial because often I think you want to play on your turn. I think I'm primarily playing on my turn these days. Also, like the sizing of like you need to line this up with a 4 power attack and not have it die to a dagger or something first is like super super real. I think you can play specifically red haze shelter and it's fine. The yellow one is like kind of bad and the blue one is like please get this out of my deck. But yeah, I think this card's like a little overrated. The red one's fine. I don't mind it. Aqua Seeing Shell makes both Waning Vengeance and Haze Shelter more acceptable because you can turn on the pitch of blue for like kind of free.
When you have ways to pitch a blue for free on board that's always active, it's a good reason to make these cards more playable. And I think if I don't have Aqua Seeing Shell, I'm just like more interested in having like a 3 block in my deck to protect my better cards.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. If you need threats, having one is fine. But I think also with these cards and just like your wards in general, I'm pretty happy using my equipment if I think that it's going to let me get my ward value. Like if I can like ward 1 and then be like, I can probably like get the ward 3 on the next attack, like that's usually pretty decent use of your equipment as well.
You know, move on to underrated cards.
Yeah. So Solitary Companion and Sigil of Solitude Red. These are both 0 cost auras that are actions and block 2. Solitary Companion's the 0 for 3 if you control no other auras, it makes a spectral shield, and Sigil of Solitude is just a 0 for 4 at the start of your turn if you control no other illusionist auras. Sorry, if you control other illusionist auras, you destroy it. I said so. Jay and I talked about this a bit before the episode. To me, these are kind of roughly interchangeable. They're zero cost cards. I find the most common use of these cards for me personally is to play them at the end. So these are just like another chain under. So I might play like Waxing Spectre or Spectral Manifestations and then play one of these down and use it as like a card that kind of pre-blocks is one of the main uses of it. I think the other really nice use of this card is the combination of them with Vengeful Apparition, where you can flash them in and get a +1 counter on it, and that's a great way to rebuild.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on the very last part. Vengeful Apparition really does make these cards really strong. I like the Solitary Companion a little bit better, or a lot better actually. It's a very strong way to have like a one card hand that does something. Solitary Companion makes the ward 3 and the Spectral Shield, and now you have a reason to protect these. You can protect the companion and the ward. That's kind of a plus. The problem that I have with Sigil of Solitude is that you kind of have to use the ward 4 if you have any other auras, and when you don't, you're not actually snowballing the game away from your opponent. And I feel like Solitary Companion is a card that lets you actually snowball, developing more ward cards with counters on it and attacking with Solitary Companion at the end. Whereas Sigil of Solitude, you kind of have to make use of that ward, and a good chunk of the time, if your opponent is coming in for small damages like Zen for like 2, then 1, then 2, then 1, Sigil of Solitude becomes, I think, quite a bit worse.
Reasonable. I think that they have different strengths. I agree that I might like Solitary Companion a little bit better, but I'm reasonably happy to play Sigil of Solitude. I think that most of the situations where its downside comes into effect, you're kind of winning the game already, has been my feeling about that card. So yeah, I think it's hard to get the ward 4 out of, so maybe because of that, Solitary Companion's just like more upside overall. But I do think, I don't know, for me, these cards are like functionally kind of similar, and I want like 2 to 3 of them.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think having, I would much rather have 3 Solitary Companions, but honestly, if 2 of them was a Sigil of Solitude, I wouldn't be complaining.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of fine. I have had Sigil of Solitude do some like pretty powerful stuff too, honestly.
Yeah, when Sigil of Solitude can attack for 4, it's kind of it's above rate.
Well, yeah, what I've liked is playing this. I like Sigil of Solitude a lot with Vengeful Apparition, where you can just like slam it, you get the counter, you get to go like play this thing, attack you with go again, then some kind of follow up. And there it's been really powerful. Solitary Companion can do the same thing. That play pattern is really, really good.
I think we talked about Vengeful Operation a bunch, but that's the other underrated card on our list. Vengeful Operation is a card that kind of fixes your problem of having to protect your ward. It does use your action point, and you do have to play Vengeful Operation to set this up, and that is like a actual cost. But playing like a blue Vengeful Operation, having it ward 1 on your opponent's turn and taking all the damage from that turn, and then flashing in a Solitary Companion or a Sigil of Solitude, it's a lot of value, right? Because then you get to keep that aura for your next turn, attack with it, and then now your opponent has to deal with the Solitary Companion with the counter on it, and it's that's kind of sick. Honestly, that's also the big reason why I like having the extra Spectral Shield from the companion more than the Sigil
Yeah.
of Solitude, because it's that much more annoying to get rid of Solitary Companion after a Vengeful Operation.
Yeah. No, I do agree with that. I think all the colors are like pretty playable because it's a block 3 as well. Blue is the best, yellow second best, red is the next best. I don't think that like the cost like I think trying to line up red Vengeful Apparition with like whatever that rare is that costs 2 is like don't even bother.
Oh, Haunting Spectre?
Yeah, just like I had a deck that had like two red Vengefals and a Haunting Spectre, and I just like never did the thing. And I'm like, this doesn't even matter. Just Haunting Spectre is not that good, and you don't need to play red Vengeful Apparition to try and make it better. It's just not good.
It's like Haunting Spectre isn't even on our overrated list because I feel like people understand that this card is just bad in general.
Okay, so that's underrated cards. Let's talk about our deck outline. 16 to 19 blues, 4 of the go again, so Spectral Manifestation, Waxing Spectre, or a Waning Vengeance with Uphold Tradition. I think that Spectral Manifestations do kind of get awkward in multiples. I'm pretty happy playing a bunch of them, but I think in the mirror you kind of do want some diversity of threats, because sometimes you wind up in these weird play patterns where you like both have an aura and do some blocking and you're hitting each other, and multiple spectral manifestations is like sometimes awkward in those spots. So I think you want like not all of your threats to be spectral manifestations, but that being said, I'm pretty much taking as many, especially of the red ones, of these as I can get.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think anything more than like 3 spectral manifestation can get kind of awkward, but against most heroes like New and Zen, having 4 spectral manifestation is fine. And if you have like 3 reds and 2 blues, it's kind of sweet. You just don't need to play the blues until second cycle anyways. So I like all the colors of spectral manifestations, and I count basically all of them in this count. 2 red, 2 blue, and a Waxing Spectre. Great.
Generics with high power in the next one. We kind of talked about this: the Emissaries, Wounding Blow, Bastion, Fact Finding Mission, Blanche. All of them pretty good. Transcendence Instance, how many are you playing in your deck? I wrote down my number, but I don't know if you agree.
I think in general, the number of Transcend cards that I'm playing is getting lower and lower in all the decks. I kind of stopped wanting them because so often in the very late game, when your opponent wants to go to fatigue, you end up in these like hands of like 3 to 4 cheese, and that could be kind of devastating. That being said, Enigma is the one that gets to use these chi the best. So I kind of up like the upwards of like 4 transcend instants. And I'm kind of okay playing like 3 to 4 would probably be my number.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm on 4 to 5. Of these Transcend Instants, I personally think that Drop in the Ocean is the best one for Enigma by like a pretty big margin. I think it's better than every other Transcendence in her by a lot, just because it stops damage. And we talked about how important stopping those at ones and twos is. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think Drop in the Ocean's very good in Enigma. It's stopping News Dagger to protect your ward and then being able to transcend is, man, like that play pattern is so good.
I had a Runaways draft where I had 4 Drop in the Oceans, and it felt completely absurd. In the mirror, my opponent pitched a chi and attacked me with a Spectral Shield, and I'm just like, drop, drop. Your Spectral Shield does no damage. I get to make a Spectral Shield on my turn and on your turn. And they're just like, oh, the game's over. I'm like, yeah, goodbye. Like, it's just disgusting.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like Drop in the Ocean is like one of them that like gets more valuable the more copies you have too.
Yeah, yeah, is kind of insane. Other than that, I think most of the ones without targets are pretty good. Homage is pretty good because you kind of want to play a long game. I like Stir the Pot in New because, or sorry, in Enigma, because shuffling back your chi is like actually kind of good. Like having like 1 or 2 chis that you're gonna draw like as you're going through your deck is like pretty strong. And then Path Well Traveled is like still a build around that enables some pretty strong blues. So I think you can still play it if you have the second tenets and the droplet series to go with it.
I also like Preserve Tradition. If you are lacking spectral manifestations in your deck, just being able to put a red spectral manifestation that you only have one of back in your deck is a good enough upside that you should have a Preserve Tradition if you're lacking on threats in your deck.
And this is another reason that Stir the Pot is kind of sweet, is like preserve tradition, stir the pot, you put the card on the bottom, then you shuffle, and you've kind of like shuffled a red threat back into your deck. Pretty good. And notably the illusionist headpiece, I think, is largely worse than the Keikoi headpiece. It's the flip one, pay 1 to flip it. It's a ward 1, and you put a aura from your discard onto the bottom of your deck. I think it costing 1 just like makes it mostly worse than the Keikoi, except in fatigue situations. But it's still pretty good, and shuffling that card back in can be relevant.
The only exception would be I think that card is much better once you have a mirror guy in your deck, and then you get to play 2 mirror guys in your deck.
I think if you're also like light on threats, like maybe you have like a pretty good deck, but you got like 1 Waxing Spectre, 1 Spectral Manifestation, 1 Waning Vengeance, and like 1 Haze Shelter, and that's kind of like all your decent wards. Putting something back is pretty okay. Sometimes you need it to close the game. So there's been decks where I actually actively want that card.
Yeah, it's so hard to talk about this format because there's so many corner cases
Mm-hmm.
where a specific card just like goes up in value quite a bit just because like you're missing something or you have more of something in your deck. And it's really hard to just say like in a clean what's that phrase? Clean cut? No. Concrete in a concrete way that one card is better than the other in this set.
With new, we kind of talked about the of having efficient ways to transcend in your deck. I think that's a little bit less important in Enigma because you often just play more transcend instants, and double transcend instant is like the most common way. But yeah, the droplet path while traveled, second tenant path while traveled, all pretty good. So yeah, that's kind of Enigma. 16 and 19 blues, 4 the Goa again effects, spectral manifestation, waxing spectre, etc. Generics with high power, 3 to 5 transcend instants, as many 3 blocks as you can get. The D reacts are pretty important too. I kind of actively want like 3 of the Red Moon Chakra Evasive Leap if I can get it. I think the difference between having decks with it and without is really strong. Oh, we didn't talk about in our key cards. Big Blue Sky. Yeah, Big Blue Sky. Very good.
Which card is Big Blue Sky, Yuki?
It's the 0 for 2 defense reaction that gets +1 for each blue pitch that you have. And you can kind of do some shenanigans like transcending with this and making a shield potentially. I've been pretty impressed with that card.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. It's a blue 0 cost defense reaction that base blocks for 2. Yeah, honestly, those stats just on its own, it seems pretty decent. And if this card ever blocks for 3 or even 4, great.
Even like Wash Away is kind of playable. The 2 for 3 where if you've played another blue, it gets +2. I don't like super want this card in my deck, but it's like kind of okay. I know that you were complaining about pick to pieces in one of our early episodes, and I think that pick to pieces is hard to beat for Enigma, but I think that one of the ways that you beat pick to pieces is by having a bunch of D reacts. That's basically like kind of what I've come to, is that the decks that have a bunch of D reacts are much, much more able, because you can like block 3 and then be like, I don't know, Wash Away, Transcend, I cover 8, I have a Spectral Shield, and they're like kind of screwed then. So it doesn't always line up, but I find that if you can even stop like one pick to pieces because you have a D react, it's like,
yeah, no, that sounds really really strong. Pick the pieces typically like destroys like 3 even 4 wards sometimes. That gives the new player the enough advantage to start turning the game around, and preventing that does sound game winning to me.
yeah, I think you can kind of expect to get picked to pieces like a couple times in a game. I feel like if they do it like 2 times, the game's close. If they do it 3 times, they kind of win. Is sort of been my feeling about the matchup, and being able to deny one of those feels like really, really big.
You want to move on and talk about the playstyle next?
So I think the biggest thing, even the devs talked about this with new, is knowing when to protect your board versus letting it go and then just rebuilding. Let's start with the second question, actually. Which one do you find yourself doing more often? Protecting your board and trying to snowball it, or letting it go and then building it back up?
I kind of like building my deck so then I can let my wards all go every turn and then rebuild, present 8 to 10 damage to my opponents every turn by using a 4-card hand. That's just like a play pattern I enjoy a little bit more. And that's basically because whenever my opponent plays a card that I wasn't expecting, that does either more damage than I thought, or even an attack reaction from new that doesn't let me protect my ward, and then I'm left with like 1 or 2 cards that I thought was going to use to pitch to attack with the wards I protected. And if the wards don't exist anymore, my hand kind of falls apart. It's not always that you get to do kind of both, of like keeping a blue in hand and keeping a card that you wanted to play if they blew up your board. I'm at this point where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna accept the fact that my opponent's gonna be able to blow up my board every turn, and I'm gonna be annoying in the way that I'm gonna rebuild my board every turn and attack them with it. That being said, if you can protect your board and start attacking, that is more powerful.
Yeah, I think you need to keep your eye out for when it is correct to protect your board. But as a rule of thumb, you should usually not be protecting your board. Especially, I think the biggest red flag is if you are making really inefficient blocks, you shouldn't be doing it. Like if they have like a 5-card hand and they're starting with a new dagger, and you're like even like committing like a 2 block, like let's say you ideally block with like a 2 block and a 3 block, it's just like you're not gonna get there. Like you just aren't. You're gonna lay out your whole hand, and they're gonna probably like have enough damage to go through your block, and you're just gonna like fall behind. But that being said, if there's like if you have a clean block, if they have like a I don't know water the seeds coming in for 3 go again, and you have a 3 block that you want to block with, like yeah, you can often block with it and see what happens. Sometimes you want to cash in your ward, but you can often block with it and see what happens. But just like don't make like really inefficient blocks to like hopefully hang on to your board unless you're like pretty sure you can get there.
How do you base this decision off? Like, what would be your like number one factor of like choosing to either, at least think about blocking out?
The first thing I look at is if it's possible to protect my board at all. So that's based on how much my hand blocks for, what their first attack is, and how many cards they have in hand/arsenal. If they have like a big hand and I don't think I can protect my board, I just won't bother. If it seems reasonable to do so, I'll consider it. And I think it depends both on how good is it if I protect my board, how many cards do I think it's going to take, like sometimes it's really obvious. They attack with like a bastion, or they have like a small hand. They go like dagger. They have 1 card. You're like it's probably a stealth card. So I can give up like 2 cards to protect my board, for example. Times when it's like really predictable, I'll also look at like what game state is better for me, the one where I protect my board and then build up, or the one where I just like let it fall and then just hit them really hard. Because I've definitely had spots where it's like I can protect my board and like hit them and then like not really do anything else, or I can just take the damage, go to 5, play a Spectral Manifestations and a Bastion, and they're at like 5 as well, and they're just dead. So just because you can protect your board doesn't always mean it's right either. Sometimes your play is just like good enough that you don't need to. So I think that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Then, do you want to talk about specific matchups? There are 3 different matchups that we have to go through. Do you want to talk about the Enigma Mirror first?
Yeah, so I think this one's mostly about pressure and being able to use your hand offensively. You need to often stick a threat, protect it, and pressure their board. Because you're both trying to do this, sometimes you like end up trading 2 card hands a little bit, and then somebody will like fold their hand, get rid of all their ward, and then play like a 4 or 5 card hand aggressively. And there's kind of like cycles of this going back and forth. Um, the game can kind of go 2 ways. I think the most common way is for the game to snowball on one side at some point where the other person just can't clear the board. And then, like, like you'll both be at 20, and then it's like, oh, one person's at 15 and the other person's dead. I see a lot of Enigma games go like this. Has that been kind of your experience how most of the mirrors play out?
Not particularly for me. I think a lot of my games do come down to fatigue.
Okay.
And I think it's because I'm more aware of trying to be able to use my 4 card hand and 5 card hands all the time, so I don't really let my opponent build a board. That being said, I also don't typically play multiple copies of cards that let my board get bigger. So almost all of my games come down to fatigue in the Enigma Mirror.
Interesting. Yeah. I've definitely had fatigue come up. And I think that if both players are building their decks in the way that we're talking about, it will actually often go to fatigue. But if somebody stumbles or somebody doesn't have a great Enigma deck or something like that, you can get very ahead. So yeah, interesting. For me, I've definitely had much more games be one sided, but yeah, I've definitely seen the fatigue angle more than once as well.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the type of Enigma cards you're playing. I did have an Enigma deck once that would have probably been like a snowball situation, but in that draft, I just didn't play against another Enigma, so I never got the chance to, experience getting destroyed by a better Enigma deck. That being said, I feel like when I had that kind of deck where I was going to allow my opponent to snowball, I don't think I was ever going to 3-0 that pod anyways.
I agree with that. Usually the good Enigma decks are like kind of naturally good in the mirror. The Enigma mirror is pretty interesting. There's a lot of tricky decisions around like when to protect your board and not, but I think that it's actually like more intuitive than you would imagine. Some people get intimidated by Enigma because she kind of plays on a different axis, but I think that the decks, I think if you play it a few times, the deck will click for you, honestly. Let's talk about Zen. So against Zen, you don't want to protect your ward. He has too many breakpoints, too much damage, too many chain links. You can't really protect your ward. Instead, you're playing big hands, 3, 4 card hands, and kind of doing that like play a ward, hit you, play a ward, hit you kind of play pattern. And if you don't have a hand that does that, you can do some blocking, of course. Um, but you're usually doing that. And then if you do snowball your board, it will typically be in like the late game when he starts stumbling. So like if he starts having to give you cards to block is like when you can snowball your board. But usually as long as he has like 4 or 5 card hands, you don't really bother trying to protect your board. You just try and get max value out of your wards. So like if you have a 2 block that you want to block with, then you can like block 2 on something, and then you think there's going to be like a chance to word 3 later, then like that's a good use of your card.
The other thing I wanted to mention in this matchup was the Enigma Zen matchup. I don't know why, but I think a lot of people assume that if Enigma ends up in a very late game with like 2 to 3 cheese in their hand, and then Zen ends up with like 2 to 3 cheese in their hand, that Enigma is supposed to be winning that late game, like the damage race. But that's actually not true. Zen being able to pitch a chi, make a crouching tiger, and then pitch the second chi to go attack with his weapon and attacking for 1 is actually just efficient enough to out damage the Enigma. And there's actually very little Enigma can actually do to break this, like, if both player only ends up with a chi board, unless Enigma has enough of a life total lead that they can just ignore the attack from the weapon once. So if you're both in a spot where like both players are at like 1 or 2, if Enigma has 2 cheese and Zen has 2 cheese, Zen's actually favored there. So you do
Mm-hmm.
need to be aware of like making sure you have 2 more life, so you can take the first weapon attack from Zen. So then you can develop a spectral shield and then make a second one attack with both, and that's the only way you can actually break that board. And that's just a note, because I've seen a couple of people being playing on the Enigma side, and they were the one that initiated that board state of like, oh, we're both out of cards, we both just have chi in hand, and they thought they were gonna win, and then Enigma just like, sorry, and then Zen just ended up attacking with whatever they got left, and Enigma being like, oh wait, I actually can't break this board, I lose because I can never attack.
Yeah, I think that's like often the case for these late game scenarios in Achi and Enigma is that if the game is too close, you kind of can't actually build a board and get ahead. What is really interesting is that usually I find it changes if you have 1 spectral shield sticking around, because if you get to like stave a spectral shield, make a spectral shield, like make 2 spectral shields and strip 3 cards, that's usually good enough to pull way ahead against anybody. So like she has like this weird dynamic where like if your board is at 0 and you're on all chi, you like almost certainly lose. But if you have 1 spectral shield, and you're in the same situation, you like almost certainly can't lose. So often the end games are like pretty close in that regard. Like the difference between a winning board state and a losing board state is like not that big.
Just be aware that before you get into that end state, how do you get yourself into a winning end state is going to be very, very important in Enigmas, mostly when you go down to fatigue. So don't, take a couple of minutes to just like think about how to get that winning board state, because a lot of times there just is a way to do it.
I think because Enigma has so many ways to like play at instant speed, and she can like potentially make 2 spectral shields and all of this stuff, it just ends up being the case that like I think Enigma really wants to think about when she takes damage very carefully and can kind of like get a lot of small advantages by like just timing that just right and then applying her pressure at just the right time. I think that's like kind of the key to understanding Enigma and really doing well with the deck is like understanding when you're supposed to be taking damage, when you're supposed to be pressuring.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, and you want to talk about the last matchup, which is the new matchup?
Yeah, I think that against new, you also don't really want to protect your ward, maybe even more so than Zen. Zen's kind of like a little better at clearing it, but the new daggers are like also pretty annoying. But I think you really kind of want to play like a value game, because what I've been noticing is if you have the like go again aura into big attack, and like New is stuck daggering, you just kind of like get ahead on value and you can just kind of crush them. So they need to find a way to like present multiple breakpoints and like pick two pieces, but like not be too inefficient at the same time, which isn't always necessarily easy for them. So often that play pattern of just like letting your auras fold is pretty strong. And it also means that you don't lose as hard to pick to pieces. If you like spend all your equipment to protect a board early, it's like a big trap against New, because then it's just like, oh, you have 4 ward, pick to pieces. And then like sometimes they just like have the nuts, right? They're just like pick to pieces, and then you try to overblock it. And then they're just like, okay, use my stilettos, give it go again, pick to pieces, venomous bite it, and you're just like, oh, I'm just dead. Like I don't know. I think that trying to like protect your ward against New is just such a trap.
Yeah, there's just so many ways they get to like punch over your blocks. It's even having like defense reaction might not be enough to stop a venomous bite. So you can get kind of blown out pretty hard if you like overcommit to blocking your wards. But that being said, New has a hard time pressuring your wards as well. So it's kind of on them to pressure you first, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think just like playing this as like a pure value game is like the biggest piece of advice I can give on how to beat New. And I think that the D reacts are really powerful because she's playing at attack reaction speed, and that's where a lot of her power comes from. Like, surprised the defense reactions are good against attack reactions. This is why you listen to the podcast, right? But like it really is true, because I think that Enigma is so selective with when she wants to block, and sometimes just being able to be like, I have this 3 block, and like if it's a hiss, I can cover it. If it's a venomous bite, I can let it fold, play out my hand, and then arsenal this for the next time this situation comes back up is like really, really good. So just being able to like make that decision after you've seen more information is really powerful, even if you can't cover all your options.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I think that covered most of the points that we had down for this episode. Was there anything else you wanted to mention before we start wrapping it up?
Just a question for you about Enigma and about the set in general. I've heard some people say that they think Enigma is the strongest. I've heard some people also say that they think Zen is the strongest. I think New is the one that people are often the lowest on, but there's also some New truthers out there. What do you think about like the relative power level of the heroes? Do you think there's a hero that is like you know how like in heavy hitters Guardian like always pretty much should have been the two? Not to say it always was the two, but like Guardian should have been the two. It had the least deep card pool. Do you think there's a class that like is less powerful or should always be the two, or do you think that like I don't know? Yeah, like how do you rate the different heroes? Is there any power outliers?
I don't think there's any specific power outliers in the sense of like, oh, who's the least powerful or who's the most powerful. I really enjoy playing New, and I think she can do a lot of strong things, and so can Zen, and so can Enigma. I do think that Enigma is the one that probably wants to be the two. I think Enigma is the only hero that if there is 3 Enigma decks, I don't think all 3 Enigma decks can be good, and that's just not the case for New and Zen.
I think I agree with that because you kind of rely so much on those go again auras. And there's just only so many copies, and you specifically want the red ones. That yeah, I think I agree with that. But I think that the power level of all these heroes is really good. The good Enigma decks are pretty nutty, though. I think like all the decks when they're really good are really powerful, but the really good Enigma decks have been like super impressive to me. I will say that. I think the ceiling on Enigma is just like so broken.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like when Enigma gets to do whatever she wants all the time, I don't think I don't think either of the heroes can really compete the way that Enigma is presenting her value. My take on this format is that New is probably the best if Zen and Enigma is contested, because New has the most ways to be annoying, and has the most ways of like picking apart people's decks apart. If they're forced to play good blues against New, then New can like take over the game with that. But once Zen or Enigma gets to essentially sideboard against New, I feel like New becomes quite a bit worse. And I kind of like this format in the sense of like there has to be some kind of balance, but I don't know if we're gonna hit that balance by the time our nationals comes up in 3 weeks. And I really don't think people's gonna have this figured out by this weekend for US nationals. So I feel like you'll get the most amount of edge right now just practicing draft and getting as many drafts in as possible, even if it's against like weaker players.
Yeah, yeah, I do think that that is true. I think that this format is incredibly deep, and there's a ton to unpack there. Um, and yeah, I think I agree with everything you said about the heroes, so I won't just reiterate it. But yeah, hugely agree. This format's honestly just really sweet. I like it. I know we keep saying that, but like I really do like this format. It's incredible.
Oh man, such a maybe that's why they did heavy hitters in like in that way they did, so like we can like hate on the game a little bit, and then they present us with like a little bit like this isn't like too hard of a puzzle to figure out, but like it definitely is like a slightly more difficult puzzle to figure out, and they're just like,
Mhm.
here you go, guys, like this is for the people who like drafting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's like their exact intention. It could be, but I think that there's like certainly something to be said for having like a mixture of high complexity sets and lower complexity sets. And I would definitely put heavy hitters on the lower complexity end, and I would definitely put Part the Mistvale on the upper end. Maybe the most complicated of any set that we've had.
Oh, by far. Maybe like Arcane Rising is like close, but that's also because they had a lot of arcane barrier and arcane damage as well, which made the set needlessly complicated.
Yeah, that set is kind of insane. There's a lot of crazy that's like a very weird flesh and blood set. The draft format is kind of wild. Maybe we can do maybe one time if we are like end of the cycle, we can talk about Arcane Rising Limited. That might be fun. All right. I think that's going to wrap us up. We've kind of rambled enough. Thanks for listening. Hope this helps you all out for your nationals if you're playing it, or just honestly your armory draft or your draft with your friends. Like whatever kind of draft you're doing. Hopefully, this gives you a good foundation on how to draft Enigma in particular, but each of the heroes as we do those episodes. Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can do so on social media. Jay is at Ueda J. I'm at Yukili Bender. That's over on Twitter. Or you can email us directly at gmail on the bobble at gmail.com. That's going to wrap us up for now. Good luck at your nationals. I kind of feel like we did a sign off. Kinda. I feel like our conversation at the end was kind of a sign off, but I don't know.
Oh, actually, have you decided on if you're gonna buy all the Marvels for this set now or no?
Yeah, I've already bought them all.
That's sick.
Look, I got some good deals on them. I couldn't say no.
Okay,
I
you know what?
I think I ended up paying 750 CAD for all the marbles.
Whoa, not all the Marvels, right? Like not the heroes.
Oh, not the heroes, not the heroes. Sorry. All the transcend marbles.
Okay. That's pretty decent actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's like pretty good. I am getting cold foil EA Traverse. I want to get cold foil EA Mask. I probably will get it, but I don't know if you've seen that card on TCG Player. I wonder if it's still the same. I'm gonna take a look right now, but that card is just like plummeting in price. So I'm sort of just like I'm just gonna wait until it stops falling in price. Um, let's take a look here. Mask of recurring extended art. Yeah, it's just continuing to fall. So the last sale is 4 days ago for 245 US dollars. The current listing is 140 US dollars. And there's just been no sales. And like every day I look, I'm like, yep, it's $10 cheaper than the last day. And it's just kind of like, so I don't know. I'll probably pick up this card when it bottoms out. But at the moment, I'm just going to watch it fall.
You know what? That's fair. Look, I'm been playing a lot of new. I feel like Mask of Recurring Nightmares is a trap against most heroes.
Interesting. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but you've been playing more of the deck than me. So who knows? Maybe.
Yeah, no, the Mask of Balance of Justice, whatever that card is called.
Traverse the universe.
Yeah, Traverse the Universe. Yeah, sorry, I call it Mask of Balance of Justice because that's basically what the card does.
Mask of inner chi.
Yeah, essentially, you block with it, you get 3 resources. How is this
Yeah.
card fair?
Yeah, I mean, it's Zen and Enigma play this pretty much exclusively. So, new playing it is not that far fetched to me. I suspect you probably want Mask in some spots, but yeah,
Yeah,
Traverse is a really powerful card.
you want Mask versus Kano because they physically don't attack you.
It's true.
Aha.
You might just want Null Rune against Kano though.
I don't want to put so many Norun in my deck. I might have to, but we'll see. We'll see where that ends me up. Look, we don't have Majin Bay in Canada, so
It's true. I feel like there's a few Canadian Kanos, but I feel like don't have to worry like as much about Kano at nationals. Does this mean I should just play Kano? Maybe this just means I'm supposed to learn Kano.
oh my god, 3
I won't
Oasis
tell anybody.
3B4.
I'm not gonna tell anybody. Yeah, I'm locked on Zen. Yeah, I'm on Zen, and then just show up with Kano.
Oh my god, that's too strong. You start to post all over your social media being like, here's the best Zen list, this is what you have to do. And then you just like you post all the Zen lists with no AB in it, and then just go Kano, right?
Yeah, got him.
Oh, that's too much for me.
Honestly, it's too much for me too. I hope that I don't know. I generally try to say what's on my mind. I hope that it comes across that way. But yeah, there's things that I don't know. There's things that I get wrong, but I do try and generally say what I think. And yeah, I don't think I like Kano. I think he's pretty good right now. I will say that I think he's pretty good right now. If I was a really good Kano player, if I was a Kano sicko, I'd probably be playing Kano. But I'm not a Kano sicko, and I don't know if I really want to learn that deck.
I don't owe gaze the ages, so I'm not playing Kano.
I would offer to lend it to you, but I don't want to play against more Kanos. So
Yeah, that's fair. I don't want to learn the deck either. And
yeah,
I've been having a lot of fun with the new. I have mixed feelings. I just sold my Marvel new that I opened, like the adult new.
yeah.
And man, I could have played with it too if I just didn't sell it.
Ugh, yeah. I kind of want to get a Marvel new, but card's expensive.
Yeah, it's kind of insane when you go to a draft and you open like a Marvel new and you're just like, I'm winning right now. I've already won this draft and I haven't even picked a card yet. I went 0-3 that draft. Yes, but Marvel
You'd do it
new.
again?
What?
You'd do it again?
Oh, every time. I would botch every draft if it got me Marvel new every draft.
Yeah. I'd be okay 0-3ing to get Marvel new too. It's pretty insane value. But the nice thing about getting Marvel new, the best part about getting Marvel new is that, it's like one of the better pulls in the set, and you didn't get unlucky and pull like Marvel drop in the ocean.
Yeah, for our listeners, we went, so 2 weeks ago is when I opened the Marvel new, and then we went to the same army last week, and then in the same draft pod, somebody opened a drop, and then everyone goes, oh, I guess that's a hit. I guess that's the worst one though. No, but it's still a hit. And we're debating on if
Yeah.
it was a miss or a hit.
Yeah, some people are like unlucky. This also happened in our most recent draft. My roommate Eli opened Marvel drop, and then somebody's like, "Oh, it's drop in the ocean, unlucky." I'm like, "That pays for your draft. It's worth more than winning the armory. It's not unlucky." But it's pretty funny. Anyways, yeah. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everyone.
All right. Good night.